some work on this hive here. We're going to take the super off and get right into the brood box and inspect the flow frame. So if you haven't seen that before, stay tuned. We'll also be looking right in at what the bees are doing and see if we can notice anything interesting going on in the brood box below. So first of all, let's give them a bit of a smoke. We've also got to put
just some gentle puffs in the entrance is enough.
So sometimes the smoke goes out a bit, so we've got to puff it till it's really going. And what we're going to then do is take this roof off. And
now it's time for me to put my hood on.
okay, so if you're new to beekeeping, make sure you protect yourself first. We get a bit complacent after a while, which does mean you get a few stings, but if you're new, it's nice to start without that. So wear your bee suit, wear your gloves, look after yourself and those around you as you get started in beekeeping. Okay, so next thing to do is to take the inner cover off. Actually, we don't need to do that because we're taking the whole super off and we're not inspecting the flow frame. So we can leave that on. That'll leave a whole lot of bees in this top box here. It won't be bothering us in the brood box.
Before you do that, I can just say this one, you've just got to notice that you've got a queen excluder. Now for us, we generally use them, but we don't always use them. If you don't have a queen excluder and you're going to pull the top box off, the queen could be up in the top. Unlikely, because she doesn't like these flow frames to lay in, but still she could be up there, and so you're going to be removing her as well. But there is a queen excluder, so the queen will definitely be down below in the brood box.
So a bit of a tip, if you remove this door, it creates a nice handle here to lift from.
Just checking in there, guys. We've just got a couple of people saying maybe the sound. Is your microphone all right there?
It's
Cedar's
my
one.
sound, because he's got the microphone.
But a bit of Cedar as well.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
let's just check. Give us the thumbs up if you can hear me talking. Okay.
You need to press here. You've gone muted.
Okay. Very nice. Okay, that should be better.
Now you should be able to hear us. And we were talking about the top box, and I was talking about the queen excluder and how, you know, if you're not familiar with a hive, if you're working with someone else, just check before you remove the top box that there's a queen excluder there. It doesn't matter if there is or isn't, you just have to know, because if there's not a queen excluder, the queen may be up in the top box when you pull it off. And so if you're looking for her, it's going to be harder.
Okay, we've got our smoker going a bit better now. Not a bad idea if you're going gloveless to give your hands a bit of a smoke. That just masks your own mammal smells a bit from the bees. Okay, next thing, we're going to pry actually we're not, we're going to go straight to prying the two boxes apart. So in this case we've got to decide whether we're going to take the excluder with the super or leave the excluder behind, and sometimes you work it out a bit as you go along. So depending on,
Can I zip you up?
on which side thank you. Depending on which side the excluder sticks to. Okay.
Generally you try and leave the queen excluder with the brood box, because again then you'll be more sure of where the queen is. If you lift the excluder up with the super, sometimes it insists on going that way. That does mean that she might be clung to the bottom of the excluder and you're lifting her out again, and in that case you have to be really careful, because you could squash her or other bees when you're lifting this off and placing it somewhere. So Cedar will try to leave the excluder with the brood box, but sometimes it doesn't work out.
Cedar, is it good above or below the queen excluder?
So Stu was just talking about that, and in this case we're trying to go above, but it often doesn't work out and it will actually stick to the super. So you have to work it out a little bit as you go, but we're going to try for above. And what I'm going to do now is just grab sometimes the super can be quite heavy, get help if you need to. And I'm just going to rock it back like that. In this case it doesn't have that much honey in it, so it's fine for me to lift. I'm just going to put it down. Now when I put it down, I'm going to lean it up against an edge so that any bees under the super don't get squashed below. Okay, so the next thing we're doing is just having a look at what's going on. We've got a bit of comb being built above the excluder there. That's pretty normal. Bees will fill any space they can find with comb inside the hive, and you can clean it up, which will make it a bit easier next time, or you can just leave it there for the bees.
Worth having a look around. You know, maybe the queen's just underneath the excluder before you, because that's the next thing we're going to pull off, is the excluder itself. And of course you're just looking for the general vitality of the hive at this point, and you know how easy it's going to be to get this excluder off. So we're going to do that now. Just going to just peel this excluder off. This is where, you know, beekeepers have preferences for different types of excluders. Some prefer the metal ones because they break off as one piece rather than peel off like this. The most important thing, I think, is that they're not too sharp on the edge where the bees are coming through.
So just remembering again on the underside there, have a quick look for the queen. You'll be surprised, sometimes you'll find her there. Look at these bees drinking from their own honey. See that? They've got their tongues out, they're lipping it up. They're straight away right into cleaning up the honey. Look at this formation with them all facing inwards here. It's neat.
So now we're going to look at just the frames, and if you look down in between the frames you can see burr comb or bracing comb, it's called various things, in between them. And so it would be a mistake to try and lift out. We're going to lift out one frame first and make room for moving frames around. And so you want to look for which one's going to be easiest to pull out without tearing up too much burr comb at first and so on. It's usually the edge ones, but not always, because sometimes they're neater on the middle where they've got their brood. But in this case it looks like it's either one of the edge ones, probably the one closest to Cedar on the hive's left. What would you say? See, it's this one?
Sure.
It's one of those things, you know. So there it is. It's pretty loose already. It's not hard. And there it is, just lifting steadily, gently out. Grab underneath.
And look at that, beautiful. We're seeing a whole lot of different pollen across here. I mean, if I put some shadow on it, it'll be easier for you to see. If you're coming close, you'll see that different colours of pollen down the cells in between the bees. There's so many bees on it, it's hard to see. And you're also seeing nectar glistening there. So what the bees do is they create bee bread by collecting pollen. They bring it into the hive and they get it off their hind legs, and then a bee with its head will stuff it into a cell, and they keep stuffing the cell full of pollen, and they'll finally top it with a bit of honey, let it ferment like a good sourdough, and that makes it more digestible for the bees, just the same for humans when they make a good sourdough bread. So it's called bee bread.
See just a few drones there. That's all you'd expect to see at this time of year. It's autumn. They wouldn't be producing drones because it's not really, you know, you're not in mating season. But there are a few there remaining, and it's quite likely they'll get tossed out over the next few weeks. Although here we have a milder climate and the bees might not be so worried about it. There's more honey and pollen on the other side. And now I'm going to shake these bees off because we're going to put this frame aside. Pretty sure the queen's not there. We've both been looking, but just in case, and just to make it neater, it's easier to inspect, of course. So now you can clearly see all the pollen on the inside, all the different yellowy colours.
Have a look, maybe with the sun down the cells this time, you get a bit of pollen up here. such a beautiful thing. Can you give us the thumbs up if you can see those colours of oranges and yellows and all of the bee bread?
Someone say bee bread?
Hey, here's my sister Mira, the bee spy, just coming in. Perhaps she can get a better shot of it for you.
Let's see if we can get.
Look at this here. That's probably not a brood cell, but it's a broken cell.
Oh yeah.
And that is the sort of thing you're looking for in terms of American foul brood.
It's not brood, so
It's not brood.
It's not brood. It's just that
It's
kind of perforated
half
cap.
capped.
It's actually
honey or
but
something.
That's what the cap would look like, I think. But let's have a look at some pollen.
I might just steady this frame up here.
Okay, I'm going to try and see over the camera.
There we go, we've got a macro shot down the cells. If you've ever seen our Flow Hive channels, you would have noticed an amazing amount of macro bee footage, slow motion footage. Most of that is my sister Mira doing her wonderful work. She's totally obsessed by bees and gets amazing visuals inside and outside the hives. And if you ever go on an adventure with her to a park or wherever, you'll find that she gets totally distracted and will end up chasing bees and leaving her friends standing by waiting.
Yeah. Yeah, people have stopped hanging out at the park with me because of that.
So what I'm going to do is put this one aside and we'll have a look at the next frame. Now we have our shelf brackets on the side which double as a really nice frame rest. So I'm just going to put it on there, and there's room for a couple more frames as well.
And all the while we're listening to the hum of the bees. At the moment it's still a contented hum. They're just busily doing what they do. We haven't, surprisingly, alarmed them too much. The guard bees will still be at the entrance looking out that way, and inside they're not expecting to be opened up, and they're just sort of calmly going about their business. But you'll hear the hum change if they suddenly realise, no, we're being invaded, there's something wrong. And that's when you might need some more smoke, or you might just need to get on with your inspection, finish it off, and let them get back together again and stop being stressed. So now I'm just going to lever this apart, and that makes it so much easier to lift out without rolling bees.
Rolling bees is the term given to the bees. If you pull a frame out with a lot of bees in between them, sometimes they can get squashed as they get rolled.
They'll get rolled and rolled between the two surfaces. See some brood on this side.
Okay, so typically you've got honey and pollen out on the edges and then brood as you go further in, and some honey around the top of the frame. So you can see the honey around the top here. Before we shake these bees off, let's just have a little look.
Look at that.
In case the queen's on here. There we go, well spotted.
You see her?
Very nice, okay.
Beat me to it this time.
Yeah, it's
Mostly. There's always a lovely competition in spot
Who
the
can
queen.
spot the queen first?
I didn't expect to see her there. There she is, wandering around.
I didn't expect to see her there either.
But she can be anywhere, and there is brood on this comb, so you would expect her to be there sometimes. And
see how her
and as we
legs-
all know, sometimes she turns up in the most unexpected places.
She
In fact,
does.
one time I was working with you, Mira, and she'd climbed over the edge of the hive
That's right.
and was right on the outside. And there we were looking at the frames, but
Like,
she was busy
where is
looking
she?
at the view from the outside of the hive.
and with spotting queens, often people look for the longer abdomen and the shorter wings, like here. But sometimes when you're trying to spot a virgin queen or one that's got a slightly shorter abdomen, you
They're
really
harder.
look at their I find their legs are really what I look for. They've
Wow.
got these kind of big, prominent, kind of golden, yellowy legs.
Mm.
come around here, see if you can get a better shot. Where
Where she is.
yeah, there we go. Give us the thumbs up if you can see the queen in the shot. Look for her wings that come just over halfway down her body compared to the other bees. And her back plate there is often worn down from being in the hive for a while, and she gets a shiny back plate right on her thorax. and her legs are bigger as well. And she moves with quite different strides to the rest of the bees.
Yeah, I find I usually spot her because of movement rather than shape, more often than not. If you kind of just glance over the frame, sometimes you just catch this different movement.
There we go. So we're happy we've got a queen in here, obviously, and we can also see brood. So this hive is queen right, it gets called, when there is a functioning laying queen and the hive is happy. So you can see down in this section here, we've got the brood. Now I'm not going to shake these bees off because we've got the queen in there, but I'm just going to gently move them away with my fingers, and we can see some brood there. This is one of the edge frames. So that's a good sign. I mean, that's second from the edge. Good sign we've got brood out this far.
Bee emerging.
Yeah, there we go. Bee spies on it.
Hang on, let me get in on this macro.
There we go. Look at that. If you come in close, you'll see that bee just chewing its way out of its cell. So it's been through that metamorphosis phase, and it's now got all of its body parts, its eyes, its wings, its legs. Amazing change from being a grub down a cell to a functioning baby bee ready to walk out into the hive and start some of its hive chores.
Wandering over her.
Yeah, it's a busy thing in a hive. There's no rest. So we can actually shift the bees away a little bit, but probably going to take another 5 minutes for her to emerge.
Meanwhile, the queen's still there. She's wandered over to the other side of the frame. Moves around pretty quickly. You take your eye off the queen and she can be over the other side of the frame or up the other end in no time. She's a bit disrupted. Normally there's other workers, about 6 attendants, all feeding her, particularly attending towards her head, and where she walks you'll leave a sort of an empty trail, a wake behind her of no bees, but it's not happening right now. It's not easy to see her, not easy in terms of the attendants clustered around her.
Oh, and that's actually a new bee. If you see this bee here, you can see how it's all furry and fuzzy. It's a newly emerged bee. It's probably working now as a cleaner or a nurse. I think they do cleaning first. But see how she kind of looks like she's got bed hair? Super kind of furry and fuzzy and a lighter colour. So that's probably she just emerged today, I'd say, not that long ago.
First of all, you change out of your pyjamas and leave them folded neatly on the end of your bed.
Then you clean your room.
Here's another baby here.
Yeah. Little newly emerged. You can see it, she's kind of fuzzy and furry and a bit lighter.
And a little bit smaller as well.
Yeah. She hasn't gorged herself on honey yet.
Very cool. Okay, because this frame's got the queen on it, what we might do is put it straight back in on the edge, and we'll have a look at the next frame. And I'm just slowly putting that down, trying not to squash any bees when I do so. Here's a drone bee, and you can tell the difference because it's got those big eyes that touch in the middle, and they look a bit more like a teddy bear. They're kind of rounded and a bit doughy in the way they move. And there it goes, but drones don't have stingers, so if you are going to give someone a bee to hold, then give them a drone.
So again, I'm going to just expand it out so there's plenty of room as we lift this frame. Now Cedar and I could just take each end if we like and just lift. Doesn't roll up against anything. This is a very healthy, so far, from what we can see, really healthy looking hive. Nicely crowded and lovely and calm too. We've been mucking around with them now for 10 or 15 minutes and there's still a very quiet hum about them. No, none of that higher pitched, annoyed and agitated hum yet.
Look at this one with pollen pants.
Yet, he says.
You can see the bright orange pollen. They're collecting some nice orange pollen from flowers locally here. We'll get Mira's macro on that and see if we can get a look at it. If I turn it around this way, we might be able to film what Mira's doing as well. There it is there. Might even have to come further around.
I'm going to reach in between your legs now.
Okay.
Because I was just talking about the hum, and I've just had one bee buzzing around my veil with that higher, more agitated hum, and she's checking me out. She's not, but nevertheless, we'll just do a little bit of calming smoke. It masks the alarm pheromones.
That's neat.
And settle them down.
Okay, so we could choose to shake these off and have a really good look. If we're doing a proper brood inspection to check for pests and diseases, we would shake all of the bees off and have a really good look down the cells for any signs of AFB or EFB. So what I'm going to do is shake them now. Now, if you're trying to get bees off something, then you want to give it a really good shake. Most movements in the hive are nice and calm, except for when you're trying to get the bees off something. Now, if you've got questions, put it in the comments below and we'll get to answering those. We've been so distracted with, we haven't actually got to your questions yet, but if you have questions, put them in the comments and we'll start answering those. Okay, I'm going to shake them off now. So now you can get a really good look at what's going on in the brood. Now we've got a bit of a mixture here. If you come in close, you can see that we've got capped brood here, so they're in the cocoon phase, going through their metamorphosis. And over here, we've got grubs that haven't spun their cocoon yet. So about 11 days in that grub phase and about 11 days in the cocoon phase for the worker bees. And you can see that these are worker bees by the shape of the cell. The drones tend to stick out like a bit of a bullet shape out, and they're really obvious that the drones, and the queen cells are even more obvious, that sort of hang down like a peanut. If you can spot the shining larvae down those cells, they're in this region here. Look like little white grubs down the cells. Any questions?
Yeah, great. Lots of people joining us and loving all these shots, and Mira loving your shots. And of course, they always ask about your macro lens, and you can talk about that later, and your ring. So, yeah, and a couple of ambassadors, Peter Cox from South Australia and Chuck Ralph in Arizona, have joined us. So that's all pretty exciting.
Welcome. It's lovely to hear you there.
Yeah, that's right. So Peter was just asking, so he's here in Australia, just wondering when's a good time in Victoria to do a hive inspection, or down south where it's a little bit cooler and obviously not as such a beautiful weather as we're having up here.
Well, it's the day as much as the season. So, you know, given it's winter in southern Australia, in Victoria and so on, you're going to get colder days, but you don't want to pick a cold, blustery day where the bees could get chilled. I mean, you could judge it for yourself in terms of, the sort of day it is and how comfortable you feel in just, a t-shirt maybe with a shirt on, or that sort of thing. So it's the day itself as much as the season. Of course, in spring and summer you're going to have more milder days, and autumn, and winter they might, you might be waiting a few days till it seems a little bit milder.
And if you live in Victoria, of course, you get 4 seasons in one day, so it's not only the day but the time of day.
Yeah.
Great. Kevin's asking, after installing a 5-frame nuke and a 10-frame brood box, how often is it okay to be checking for their progress?
Look, if you're able to just, if the bees are unstressed like this, so you'll know, oh, I just got a sting, but anyway. So there's a lovely little sting.
A lovely little sting.
Yeah, macro sting.
If the bees are calm and you're a beginner, I would advise you to go in more often rather than less often, just so that you get used to it. And
still
you'll know
something.
if the bees are getting stressed by your presence and by being opened on a slightly cold, blustery day or whatever. You'll sense that well, you'll
100%.
get to know because they'll get more stressed and upset. I was
Whereas
there.
the sting, you just smoke the sting to mask
sting.
the alarm.
So, so I would say do it often. Having said that, some people say no, leave them alone.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I would.
this is one of those things.
It's one of those
where
questions.
I would
different
say-
Here we
beekeepers
go.
will give you
Three
different-
different versions. Okay, Mira.
I would say you've got to just, you've got to be careful not to open them too much, because when you open a hive, you're also disrupting. They glue everything together, they perfectly align everything. So it's really about finding a balance between making sure that they've got the space they need, they've got the help they need to defend against small hive beetle and pests and diseases. But it depends. Some beekeepers love going in and inspecting heaps. So it depends what your tendency is, I think.
Yeah, there is that.
Like-
But the reason I was saying it, and you're right, it's slightly tongue-in-cheek, but
Yeah.
is because beginners will tend to be more tentative and they therefore leave it for too long.
That's
And so
somewhat,
and I think the idea is to get to the stage where you enjoy going in, you look forward to it.
Yeah.
And so if your bees suffer a little bit because you're in training, I think that's okay.
Yeah, no, I agree, Stu, I agree. Especially when you start a hive and they're building natural comb, you want to be going in there
That's true
quite
too.
regularly to make sure that you're not getting cross
Everything's
comb.
straight, yeah.
And it also depends whereabouts in the world you are. If some people's strategies for varroa mite, for instance, which we don't have here in Australia, is to get in there and manage them often,
Yeah.
depending on what method you're using. So asking your local beekeepers will give you a good idea of what's normal in terms of getting in and inspecting your brood for problems.
It's got more weight in it than you'd expect, more honey than I would expect. I can feel the weight at this end anyway, and you're going to take it, Sans?
Got it. So it's got quite a lot of brood though. It's full of brood and honey.
Mm.
In this case, the brood's adding to a bit of the weight, because if I shoo some of these bees away, you can see really nice brood over here. It's great when you see it like that. There's so many
Beautiful.
ones just about to emerge. We're going to have an explosion of baby bees in this hive within the next 11 days. And hopefully they will coincide with some nice flowering species like the paperbark, perhaps that'll kick off again, and they'll be able to then go and get it. It's when you get that beautiful synergy between a lot of bees in the hive and a good flowering that they really can haul the nectar in. So hopefully that'll happen to this hive.
Beekeepers like to see the brood really clustered and even, like this is. It shows that the queen's really fertile and active. She's not laying just sporadically, she's laying methodically and really consistently. So it's showing a good quality, probably youngish queen. But you do see that there's the occasional whole, honeycomb cell not covered in, and you think, oh, she's missed that one. Well, she's missed it on purpose, because they're called heater bee holes. And so when things are a little bit cool in the hive, the heater bees, and that's a phase that they're going through, one of their roles, they'll pop down the hole, they'll disengage their wings, and they'll shiver their flight muscles to heat up the surrounding brood. So it's a heater bee hole.
I
And
didn't
it's
know
there on
that,
purpose.
Stu. Learn something new about the bees every day.
There you go.
Yeah, and it's funny, humans breed for all of these traits, and one of them is a really hard-packed brood section. But in the end, we might be breeding out one of their useful traits in those colder times of having those heater bee holes in the brood.
Yeah. Well, I guess so. I hadn't thought about that. There's no shortage of potential to start an argument in beekeeping.
Definitely not.
Kenny Taylor in New Hampshire is asking, while you're on this, when does the queen start laying her eggs? Saying there's nectar in the partially developed honeycombs. So
There should be nectar in your partially developed honeycomb, because that's them using their honeycomb to store well, nectar which they'll process into honey. And so you'll only be concerned if you can't find any eggs, which need bright sunlight and good eyes to see down the bottom of the cells, or the little grubs, the little larvae, or indeed capped and sealed brood with the bees incubating. That's what you're looking for in terms of the queen, the hive being queen right, as Cedar said before. In other words, the queen's there and she's laying well. So, but of course, in other cells they're storing pollen and they're storing their honey. And so you'll expect to see cells with half full of sort of watery honey as they process it down into honey itself. Does that make sense? Did I get that?
Yeah, well, yeah, Kenny was just wondering, like, so when does she start doing that?
So when a queen mates, it may take a couple of weeks for her to start laying, because she might go on a couple of mating flights, and that's a bit weather dependent. And once she's been on a mating flight, she'll start, she won't mate again. That'll be it for her entire life as a queen, after those couple of mating flights in the first week or two. And then she'll get to laying, so she'll find empty cells, and what happens is the worker bees actually go down there and clean the cells ready for the queen to lay in. So they'll pick an appropriate area inside the hive, which is usually pretty central, because they want to maintain a nice temperature. And the worker bees will get down there, they'll clean them out, and they'll leave a pheromone on there, which is a little bit like the door hanger on a hotel, saying all clean, ready to roll. And then the queen will know that she can go and lay in that cell. She'll go and she'll check it for size to see whether it's a worker or a drone size cell. Then she'll reverse into it and lay an egg right down the bottom. A new queen might lay multiple eggs as she's finding her feet as a new queen, but usually it's just one in the bottom, and that's when everything's working normally. If you see eggs on the side wall of the cell, then it's likely that you've got laying can't quite reach the bottom of the cell because their abdomen isn't long enough. So,
and that's a worry. That means the current queen either isn't there or isn't producing pheromones, is weak in some way. The workers want to lay, but they're always held back by the queen's pheromones, and so they shouldn't be laying. But just to also say that, you know, the eggs are hard to see. So with that question, it may be that there's quite a few cells do have eggs in them, unless in bright sunlight for a fine, translucent, tiny little, it's like the smallest fingernail clipping you can imagine down the bottom of the cell. That's what the egg looks like. So they're hard to see, and of course that's what's there first, and that'll take a few days to sort of hatch into the larvae and so on, and then the larvae easier to see. So the whole process for a worker bee is a 21-day process of egg to larvae to bee. So you've got a fair bit only just been introduced. It's going to be 3 weeks before new worker bees will be hatching out.
Just a couple of people commenting again, Cedar. I don't know if you've pushed your mic again, but the sound's gone a little bit quiet again.
Okay, let's try.
I love our Facebook watchers. They keep us on our toes.
Thumbs up. Okay, it's gone flat.
Ah,
Yeah.
maybe we should
have we got?
swap.
Maybe we
Okay.
should just unplug and...
Put that one on, Stu.
Okay, all right, we'll do a little
Sorry,
microphone swap. Sorry about this, folks. Here we go. That means you've lost me. I'll have to shout.
Okay, so we should have audio again. Sorry about that. Flat batteries. So let's just put this right here and we'll keep going. But yes, Trace will have to come in close for the questions. So it's a very family affair here today. I've got my sister Mira, my father Stuart, and Trace, who you've probably all spoken to on the phone in the office. She's going to be crowding in the shot as well. So keep those questions coming in.
All right, so we've got a question actually, was on feeding the... Oh, here we go, Stu. I'm talking to Stu's chest here. Question on feeding the bees. When do you know, well, quite a few in the same question, when do you know to feed them, and how do you know when to stop feeding them? And can they be overfed? Like, can you turn them into fatty bees? Overfed bees, happy bees.
You know, this is where we say consult your local beekeepers, because things vary from season to season, and the local beekeepers in your region will know more or less what's going to be happening with the flowering over the next few months. And so it'd be a bit of a mistake to feed bees just in case, just when actually in 2 weeks' time a major flowering is going to happen. So you've got to know your flora, and these days that's difficult. Climate change has changed that a bit and made flowering and so on a little bit more erratic. Nevertheless, consulting your locals will help you judge that. And it's also about overwintering. So we don't have to overwinter here. So I don't think it's good for me to pretend to know about it all, because as I understand it, and can be corrected, you only feed before they're going into their hibernation stage. You don't feed afterwards. You feed them up if you're worried that they don't have enough stores to get them through the winter.
Unless they're starving, in which case feed them anyway, because it's better than them dying. But if you can feed them prior to winter, it's better.
Yep.
Yeah, they can't reduce. So if you're feeding sugar syrup, so I kept bees in Berlin, which is a cold climate, and the summer nectar flow would fill up the flow frames, and I'd harvest them and remove the flow super, and then I'd let the autumn flow fill the brood box for the winter stores, and I'd also feed them some during that time. It's important not to feed liquid sugar when it's too cold, because the bees actually can't reduce the water content, and they can end up with to store it as honey and cap, that end up with kind of this mouldy, wet hive, and that's not good for winter. So yes, it's definitely something that's so unique to the location, and so really like finding a local beekeeper, doesn't matter if it's not a flow hive, it's the same theory. It's the same as a Langstroth beehive. It's the same practice. So anyone who's a beekeeper in your area can advise you, what are the nectar flows like, when are the times that feeding might be needed. But like Cedar said, if you've got a weak colony and it's starving, feed it. All right.
So the way you know if it's starving is, first of all, of course, there's not honey stores in there, but then you'll also see lots and lots of bees head down in the cells looking for the last bits of honey and nutrients. So you'll see lots and lots of bee bums sticking up, and they're hungry. And so if you see that, that is really an alarm time. They don't have much longer to go without stores like that.
Yeah, I mean, I had a hive recently that was just a 4-frame split, and we had a month of kind of almost constant rain. And I checked them, and they had no honey stores and no nectar coming in. So I gave them a bit of sugar for a few days, and that saw them through. So
So in answer to too much feed, the reason why you stop feeding is because you don't want feed sugar syrup going into your honey stores. Otherwise you get honey that's actually sugar syrup, which isn't what you're after at all. So beekeepers will tend to stop feeding and make sure that all of those stores are getting used over the winter time or time without flowers, and that way you are storing honey instead of sugar. Okay, let's have a look at this frame. This is a typical edge frame where they've gone and they've produced beautiful honey on the edge of the hive, and you can see that there has been some things flowering recently, because this area here has glistening honey down the cells. They're capping it off up the top here, and they're yet to finish even drawing out and filling the cells down here. This would be a great comb to cut a bit of comb out to take away, to take to a party or put it on a cheese platter or something. And it's easy to do. You can just get a knife and cut yourself a shape, put the frame back in, and the bees will fill it in quite quickly. So if you are wanting some honeycomb from your flow hive, have a look at the edge frames of your hive, and you'll probably find there's honeycomb there you can harvest a bit from. You could harvest the whole frame if you wanted to, or you could just harvest a section by simply cutting out a shape in the comb.
Again, you would do that in the spring or summer when it's warmer. Right now, even here, they're wanting their stores, the honey, to not only eat when they don't have enough coming in, but to keep the temperature of the brood stable. The honey is a thermal mass, and it's excellent. That's why they put it around the edge of the brood, to keep the brood a stable temperature.
So I've just noticed the tone of the bees change. Can you hear that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're getting a bit sick of
being in here,
having the hive apart. We'll add a little bit more smoke, and we'll start putting these bees back together. So
well, I'll go for another question, hey Trace?
right.
While you put it back together.
Stu, just wondering, do we prefer a specific breed of honey or are they hodgepodge?
Breed of bee?
Breed of bees, yeah. I had to say hodgepodge
Hodgepodge.
because it was there.
Your genetics are quite important. And and again, this is a regional thing, and I would consult local beekeepers. So around here we tend to use Italian stock, but down in Victoria, my brother's had real success with, oh golly, now I've forgotten which one he got.
Caucasian.
Probably Caucasian, yeah. Anyway, that's actually that's one of the fascinating things. Rather than take anyone's word for it, you can experiment with it, particularly if you've got more than one hive, and compare them. But you'll find that even between the same queens and same stock from the same breeder, you'll still get enormous differences in how a colony will behave. They've all got their own personalities, and so it's more that, the particular DNA of that queen, and then, you know, the breeding after that.
Right, Stu. Wondering, Nikki's asking, what would you do if the queen, like when you took the super off, if the queen was on the queen excluder, would you just relocate her, or what would you do to put her back into the hive?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you can pick her up if you want to, but it's best to just shake her or coax her gently back into the hive, unless you are trying to catch her, in which case it would be convenient. The main thing is that you know where she is, and you know she's not going to fall on the ground, because if the queen falls on the ground outside the hive, she can't, once she's mated and is swollen with food and eggs, she finds it very, very hard to fly, and she may not be able to get back into the hive again if she falls on the ground. So when you know where she is, that's the best thing, and then yes, you can coax her back into the combs itself, with your hand or a gentle shake, or just letting her run in. You know, if you just lean the excluder in that case, up against the frames.
So what I'm doing now is just trying to put the frames back in the same order, and the burr comb actually helps tell a story of how they go back. This last frame I'm not quite sure whether it was in here, but I think it was.
Yeah, we took the edge frame first.
So we're just going to try and get that down in there. Now there's a lot of bees here, so we might add a bit of smoke just to clear them out of the way, while we then slip that frame, the last frame in. The last frame's the hardest to get in and out because you're going vertical rather than sideways and up. So we're picking up that frame now and just having a look. Now it's pretty straight, this one, a really fine example of a naturally drawn comb where the bees have drawn it and connected it to the edge. There's no wax or wire here. It's one of the methods you can choose. However, you can add foundation to these frames if you want to. So it looks like there's enough room to go down. I'm just noticing there's a bit of a bulge.
A bit of a gap there. Can I use that? Oh, okay.
Oh yeah. So we can go crossways here.
Oh, for some reason that. Anyway.
There's a bit of
Bit of wax on the wall there.
bit of wax just here, preventing the frames from going together properly. Let's see if we can get that off. And I'm going to push that over.
A bit of spilled honey in the hive doesn't matter. The bees will clean that up.
Okay, we can scrape the wax off the walls if you want to. Try not to hurt any bees. And now there should be enough room to sink this frame down. That's a little better there. And there we go. Now I am seeing a bit of a bulge here. And you have to be mindful of where two combs meet, because that's an area where beetles can take hold. If there's not enough room for the bees to service, if you've got the hive beetles in your area, they can take advantage of laying in that zone. So typically that bulge should line up with something, so we may have these two frames the wrong way around. Swap it, or we could just take an opportunity, because that's just honey there, to cut that bulge off and give the bees access to that section. I'm going to do that now with my tool, and this can just stay in the hive for the bees. It's really important not to leave honey out of the hive because other bees will come and it'll start a robbing frenzy. So there we go, the bees will clean all that up and you'll have some nice straight frames again. Mira's decided to
Play with the bees.
play with the bees.
Well, even though they're telling us they're a little bit,
Upset.
they're kind of like, we're done. They're still incredibly docile and placid bees mostly. And so they were on the side of the box and I was just picking them up and shaking them in. So there's a few more here and I can just gently. Come on, girls.
I mean, they only stung Stu once, which means they're pretty much a perfect hive.
Yeah, I didn't see what was happening. It's possible that bee that nipped me was just a little bit squashed. It was on my hand, I hadn't noticed it, and I bumped it against something and it went, whoa, what's going on here? I didn't see. But they don't seem to be heading, sending out the aggressive defending troops.
No, we might want to clean this off a little bit. It's got some pretty good
burr
comb that I want to eat.
I've got this microphone and I keep moving over towards you rather than giving you space just so you can be...
I'm going to shake that bee off my finger first and I'm going to sneak this up in my veil.
Waste no time.
That is the advantage of a veil compared to a hood.
Exactly. I came prepared for honey
munching.
I'm alright. Just gonna.
Just wondering why you're doing that. With Ali, someone's just asking, how have you put the super down on the ground before you put that super back up? I wonder.
Oh, here it is there.
Yeah,
We're just
to show someone wanting to know how you do that.
So you basically just want it supported well. It can be also tipped like this
on its end.
on its end. The bees, that won't worry the bees either. At the moment, this is still propolised on the inner cover itself, so it's not going to fall off. But generally, you put it like that, and now I have to be careful putting it back, just so there's a couple of edges supporting it. Sometimes I tip the roof over and put it diagonally on the roof because again it's just supported by 3 or 4 points then. But yeah, it's
the basics of that is you're just trying not to squash bees, so you're leaning it up against something so the bees underneath don't get squashed.
Yep.
Does the queen ever stop laying eggs, and if so, why?
Yeah, she does stop, but it's after quite a few years. And so by her 3rd year, she's really slowed up, which is why most beekeepers, particularly commercial beekeepers, will replace their queens, if not every year, then every 2 years, because she's slowing up. And so if you want a vigorous hive ready to respond to sudden nectar flow, then you would requeen. However, she will keep lasting for years and years, just gradually slowing up, and it's the bees themselves that will decide, she's slowed up too much, she's not laying enough, she's out. And they will initiate making new queens, making queen cells, and finally, kicking the queen out. Sorry, we're talking about just placing the queen excluder has been put on, and now the super gently put back on again. So the whole hive's together now, and the bees will settle down. We'll hear that slightly higher noted, slightly agitated hum settle down in a moment, because everything's in its place again. Now I've forgotten completely what I was talking about.
Beautiful. So thank you so much for all your questions today. We've got time for one more as we just finish off the last pieces of this hive and put it back together.
Fantastic, Cedar. And just noticing that the Flow Hive 2 and the Flow Hive 2 Plus have the plug in the inner cover. Do you just leave it in all the time?
Yeah, generally, unless you're using that hole to be a feeder. A small jar with sugar water and a lid with a perforated lid. Or if you're getting really fancy, you can put an empty jar, small jar again, over that hole, and bees will build honeycomb up in that jar. When they've finished, you can take it off, let the bees get out, and then fill it with honey. And it's a lovely present with a clear honey and then honeycomb inside the jar.
Thank you so much for all your questions today. We've been doing a bit of family beekeeping here. And if you want some really in-depth training material, have a look at the beekeeper.org. It's also a fundraiser there. Really in-depth training to take you from square one right through to having a deep knowledge of beekeeping. So take a look at that. Also lots of videos like this on our Facebook stream or our YouTube channel to get a look at. Thank you so much for all your questions. Catch you again same time next week.